Okay, so I think today we're gonna actually talk about a virtual memory. Uh, Virtual memory is so the topics today and also this Thursday will not be in the test. So just let you know, the test are gonna cover chapter 4, 5, and 6, not the virtual memory. Virtual memory is chapter 7 in the Zai book. So okay, let's just start right now. So last couple of classes we just talked about the pages. Um, so the idea of paging is like this. So suppose we have a physical memory. This physical memory is structured in a way that the memory is partitioned into a small unit. Okay, it's called a frame. Okay, so that unit has a certain actually size. Okay, depend on each of the computer system. You know, typically, so the frame size are all the same. Okay, and in the meantime, each of the computer program is also partitioned into something called page. And the page size always matches the frame size. So so that way with paging, when we actually measure the size of a program, we basically measure that how many pages a program going to need. So so in this particular case, let's say a program requires 5 pages. And then we have a page 0, page 1, page 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Now, in terms of a memory allocation, so with paging, so then all you need to do is you need to check the physical memory to see whether I have 5 friends. 5 friends. Okay. If I have 5 friends, then I can load the whole program into the memory. And I can load one page into one frame, another page into another frame, and another page into another frame. And the loading doesn't have to be, in the same physical location. Doesn't have to be a contiguous memory location. So as far as we have enough actually frames in the physical memory to accommodate these 5 pages, then we're okay. So so that's the advantage of the paging, because you don't have to actually make sure that the whole program going to be allocated to the same memory location. So this is going to actually increase the memory utilization. Now to track which page is actually in which frame, then you need something called a page table. So now with the paging, so you know each of the pages actually organized into uh, some actually assigned some number. So the first is page 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is actually we call this the location of each of the um, instruction in the program is called the logical address. And once you actually allocate each of the page into the physical memory, then the location of the corresponding physical address is called a physical. It's called a physical address. Okay. Okay. Now the page table only cares about which page is allocated to which memory frame. Okay. So the page 0 is allocated to, for example, here's a frame number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say 100, and the last one is 999. That's let's assume that's the size of the physical memory. So the page 0 is mapped to frame number 2, and the page 1 is mapped to frame number 4, and the page 3 2 page page 1, yeah, page 2 is mapped to frame number 100, and the page 3 could be mapped to frame number 0, and the 4 mapped to, you can actually assume that's what the page table actually recorded. Okay. Now in turn, now once you have a page table, so you basically match each of the page in the logical memory address, logical memory into the physical memory, and that page table just record the page. Now in terms of which particular memory address maps to which particular, or I'm sorry, logical address maps to which particular physical address, then it requires a little calculation, but not much, because each of the memory memory address is actually recorded using something called offset. The offset basically measures, how far away of this address to the beginning of this page. So in this page, for example, this is actually a particular instruction. So once you load the page into the physical frame, the relative location of the actual address, or the instruction that is located in this memory address, is the same. So the distance between this particular address to the beginning of the page is called offset. Okay. So the offset is always the same. Okay. So this is how you're going to map the actual address to the um, physical address, the logical address to the physical address. Okay. So here's what you do, because based on the paging, the logical address going to be divided into two parts. The first one is a page part. The second one, W, is the offset, measures the offset. Now the physical address is always also divided into two parts. One is the W. W is always the same because the number of offset are always the same. That's basically measures the size of the page. Now this part is going to be used to measure the number of frames. Now depend on how many bits you allocate for the frame, it basically tells you how many frames are in the physical memory. But and how many bits are allocated to the page, they basically tells you how many pages are used. For example, if the logical address is actually use 4 bits for the page and 4 bits for the offset, so then the total actually logical address use 8 bits. Now the physical address use 6 bits and still 4 bits for. So then the physical address is going to use 10 bits. Okay. So now once they actually mapped the page number to the friend number. Okay, so then you can actually easily just see that okay, so when you actually the page actually P maps to friend number F. Now then the corresponding memory address P and the W actually maps to F and W, and the W is not changed. So the offset is going to be the same with with 4 bits for the offset. So you basically have you can represent total of 16 edges, right? Total of 16 edges from 0 to 15. Okay. So the W, if the W value is 1010, which is basically represent 10, the decimal value 10. So that means if the W is 10 in the logical address, the W is going to be always 10 in the physical address. So the relative location of the actual address never changes. Okay. In the page. Okay. So that's basically the way that you can map a logical address to the physical address. So first locate which page maps to which frame, and then you locate which particular address in that page maps to which particular address in the frame. So the beginning of each of the page, the beginning, you know, of each of the page. Um, Let me take it another way. The first offset in each of the pages is always 0, 0, 0, 0, right? So if your offset is 10, that means it's the actual in the 11th position. If the offset is 9, if that means it's in the 10th position. So that relative position never changes. So that's basically the page. Now today we're going to talk about the something called a virtual memory. Now once we actually figure out how can I use the paging to map the logic address to the physical address, then people are going to think about, what about if I reserve a space, say in the hard disk, like in your hard disk or uh, you know SSD, solid state drive, or any kind of hard disk space. Now, hard disk space is always bigger, much, much, much bigger than the memory space. Now, let's say if I actually define a kind of something called a virtual memory, okay? So that virtual memory could be of any size, as far as you know the virtual memory size is smaller than the physical memory, the physical actually hard disk can accommodate. So I can actually reserve a memory space called a virtual memory. Okay, the virtual memory it could be much much bigger than the physical memory. For example, my physical memory is 4 GB, and I can say, okay, I will create a virtual memory which is like 8 GB or 16 GB, which is double or 4 times the size of the physical memory. So I can reserve that much space. And then once I reserve the space, I can actually put a virtual memory in the back store, like a hard disk. Okay. Now, the virtual memory is typically a collection of one or more logical address space, each of which may exceed the size of physical memory. So let's say I have like a couple of programs. Program 1, I have another program, program 2, I have another program, program 3. So nowadays, you may actually expect to see like 100 or like a 200 programs running in a computer system. Okay, all these programs are running in a computer system. Okay, each program uh, consists of a whole bunch of instructions. So each program has a size, right? Now, so if I put all the program together and store these program, just in a virtual memory. Okay, so these programs are all put together in a virtual memory space. Okay, and then the physical memory could be much smaller. Okay, now when I put like a 100 actually program in a virtual memory, doesn't necessarily mean these 100 programs are all in the physical memory. It's just a virtual memory. Okay, now if I have like a 100 programs, like a P1 all the way to P100, so these programs, each program has certain size. Okay, I store this program in the virtual memory because I can make the virtual memory bigger enough to accommodate all these programs. Okay, so that's what I do. Okay, then depend on which the computer system. If the computer system decide to load the program one into the physical memory, so that means if you decide to run the program one, so you load the program into the, because if you want to run the program, you have to load the instruction for that program into the physical memory, because that's the only place the computer system can run the program. So, so that's typically what they do. So you have a whole bunch of programs, and if you want to run that program, so then you have to load the instructions of these programs into the physical memory. Okay. Because of the size of the physical memory, you cannot load all the programs you actually have in this computer program into the physical memory because physical memory is limited. So you can actually install many programs. You can install like 100 games. You can have a operating system. You can have actually install the like your Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheet. You can install the Adobe. You can install any actual program in a computer system. Your computer system can install many programs. Okay. Now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can run all these programs at the same time, right? Because the physical memory is limited. So typically, you only run a handful of programs, a small subset of the programs that's installed in the computer system. Not all the program going to be running at the same time. Okay. Now, so suppose we all these programs are actually, if you need, suppose I want to run all the programs at the same time. I have a 100 programs. So that means I need to have enough memory space to accommodate all these programs. Okay. Let's say I have a 100 program, P1 to P100. Now each program takes 10 megabytes. Okay. Each program takes 10 megabytes. With 100 programs, I need to have 100 times 10 megabytes, 1000 megabytes space. Okay. Now, which is fine. Okay. That's 1 gig, not 1 gigabyte. It's about 1 gigabyte, right? 1 gigabyte is actually 1024 megabytes. That's 1 gigabyte, but it's smaller than 1 gigabyte. It's close to 1 gigabyte. So, okay. So now let's say if I have a 1000 program from 1 to 1000, and then I need actually, if I want to actually run this 1000 program at the same time, all loaded into the physical memory, so I need a physical memory space of 1000 times 10, so that's 10,000. So it's about a 10 gigabyte. space. Now, if my physical memory is only 4 gigabyte, let's say only 1 gigabyte physical memory space, then I cannot load all the program into the physical memory space. But I can still define my virtual memory to be 10 gigabytes. So that means my virtual memory can accommodate all the programs. But virtual memory is just a virtual memory. It's basically, it's a collection of a logical address space. So it's a logical memory, logical address space. That basically means, you know, it's not really the physical memory space. So if you know, so now if I want to run with 1 gigabyte, so now I have a total of 1,000 programs. So if I want to run using 1 gigabyte, suppose that the whole memory space is used to run these programs. So each program takes 10 megabytes. So that means I can only accommodate 100 program, right? Because each program actually is 10 megabytes, 100 times 10 megabytes, about 1 gigabyte. So I can run 100 program. It's only 1/10 of the total programs. Okay. Now, if I want to actually run additional program, so then I have to either, you know, take away some of the program, remove some of the program from the physical memory and free up the space so I can load the next program. Okay. If I haven't, so that's a limitation. Now, there's a one way people try to actually figure out is they use something called a demand page. You know, right now, I have a 1,000 programs and each takes 10 megabytes. So I can only execute 100 megabyte, 100 actually programs, at the same time with the physical memory, 1 gigabyte. Okay, that's just actually simple math. It's it's the real scenario is more complicated than this. Now, but this is based on the assumption that when I run each program, I have to load the whole program into the memory. So when I run a program, I have to load a total of all the 10 megabytes, into the memory. So that's why the reason why I can only load 100 programs. Okay, because if I want to run the program, I need to load the whole 10 megabytes into the memory space. Now, if the memory space, physical memory has no 10 megabyte space, then this program cannot be loaded into it. Okay, so that's the current assumption. Now, what about if someone say, well, do I have to load all the actual instructions for the program into the memory before I run this program? Okay, now my question is, do I have to load the whole 10 megabytes, the whole, you know, program into the memory space before I can run this program? The answer is certainly not, right? Because when I start to execute the program, I basically the CPU basically just fetch one instruction from this program if the instruction is in the memory. And then when I finish the execution of the instruction, and then I load the next instruction, and then I load the next instruction. So assume I have a one actually CPU, and at any time, CPU only execute one instruction. Okay. So that means if I want to run this program, do I have to load all the instruction into the memory? The answer is certainly not, right? Because even if you load all the instruction into the memory, but the CPU still pick one instruction after another, one instruction after another. Okay. So it sounds like this is kind of waste of memory space. And you load actually like a 1000 actual instruction into the memory, but the CPU is still going to execute one instruction and then execute next instruction, execute next instruction. So it's still actually executing instruction one after another. So while CPU is running this particular instruction, fetch the instruction into the CPU register, and then the rest of the instruction are sitting in the memory without doing much, right? So this is actually give us the idea of something called the demand paging. The demand paging is a principle of loading a page into the memory only when the page is needed. Okay, rather than at the start of the execution. So you don't have to actually load all the pages of the program into the memory. I just load one page after another, one page after another. Okay, just load the page by page. Okay, here's what I do. So the demand page make the implementation of virtual memory possible by moving pages to the main memory only as needed. Okay, now this is kind of good, right? So that means um, initially, even that program takes like 10 pages. But when I try to load the program, execute the program, and when I try to execute instruction in the program, I only load the page that contains the instruction and load that page into the memory and then start to executing these instructions. Okay. Now, when I continue to execute the instruction until I'm going to execute the instructions in another page, which is not loaded yet, and then the CPU, the operating system is going to find out, oh, you want to load, you want to execute another instruction, but that instruction is not in the physical memory yet. So you try to fetch the instruction which is not loaded into the physical memory yet, and then I find out the page that which contains the instruction, and then load the page into the memory. Okay. So when I'm gonna load the page into the memory only when I need to execute the instruction in this page. Okay, so that's the idea of virtual memory. Now everything comes with the price, with the cost. Nothing comes with free. Okay. Now what's the drawback with this approach? With the virtual memory approach, with the demand page approach. Can you give me any wild guess? What's the drawback?
You might waste time switching between fetching the page you want,
Okay,
I'd guess.
by wasting some time, right? Okay. Yes, that's one of the possibility. Because when you actually, you know, try to fetch an instruction from the memory, and then that instruction is not yet loaded into the memory. So then you have to actually load the page into the memory from from actually your hard disk, you know. That's very costly, you know, because that could actually impact the performance. Now, typically, here's what the computer system is actually doing. Now, here's the CPU, and here's the physical memory. Okay, and then here's the backstore and the hard disk. the virtual memory is basically you store all these you know program in the virtual memory, and this is a physical memory. Okay, so when I actually try to execute this particular program, let's say which consists of 4 pages. Okay, now I start the instruction from here. So when I say, oh, I want to execute the program, so I just load this particular page into the physical memory. And when the CPU start to fetch this instruction, and the CPU can fetch the instruction into the register and execute. And the CPU fetch the next one, fetch the next one. So each page may contains thousands of instructions. And then until CPU actually fetch last instruction in this memory, and then the CPU try to, it's just like when you actually in the execution, the order of execution, the sequence of execution. I'm gonna execute this in the program for the page. I execute the instruction in that way, so one after another. Okay. Now, then after I finish the execution of this instruction, which is still in page 0, and then suddenly next instruction is going to be in page 1, right? Now in here, that instruction in page 1 is not loaded yet. So when physical memory try to fetch the next instruction based on the, the virtual memory address, and then it find out that instruction is not loaded. So you have to stop and then load the next instruction, then load the next page into the physical memory. Doesn't have to be in the consecutive area. So then the CPU going to start to say, okay, the next instruction is over here because this one maps to here. So the CPU start to execute this, fetch this instruction and continue to execute. Okay, and then when it reached its limit, and and then they find out, okay, the next instruction is in here, which is not yet loaded into the physical memory, and then load the physical memory again. Now, the communication between CPU and the physical memory is relatively quick, but the communication between physical memory and the hard disk, it's slow, and this is fast. Okay. Now the communication inside the CPU between registers, these are fastest, you know, fastest. Okay. And this is still fast. Okay. Now, how fast is the communication between CPU and the physical memory? For modern days, it's just like some kind of like a 10 nanosecond or something. Now, the communication between physical memory and the hard disk, we're talking about like 1,000 microsecond or something like this. It's relatively slow because many times the hard disk, if you search for a, a particular actually pages in the hard disk, like a search a file in the hard disk, you require some kind of physical operation, like using the magnetic disk. You're going to spin the disk and to the location, even though the disk are going to actually rotate at a very fast speed. Okay, so for most of the hard disk, you can actually rotate at the speed of like 7,200 per minute. Okay, even for laptop, most of the actual speed are going to be 5,400 per minute. That's really fast, right? But nothing going to be faster than the speed of light, speed of the electricals in the wire. So it's relatively slow, you know. Now when you try to access the data in the physical memory, Sometimes you can even hear the noise, like you can hear the click sound when you actually try to access the data in the physical memory. So it's slower. It's probably like a thousand times or even 10,000 times slower than the memory at a memory actually access. So it's pretty costly. Okay. But the good thing is that with the limited physical memory, you can support more programs running in the physical memory. Because think about this. When you run a program, you're not load the whole program into the memory. So that means with the limited physical memory space, you can actually simultaneously run more programs. You can simultaneously run more processes, right? Because you are not fully loaded for each of the program. That's the trade-off. That's always the trade-off. Okay. So now here's the thing, because we use page table to record which page for the program is loaded into which memory, physical memory frame, right? Which page is actually mapped to which frame. Now with the demanded page, not all the pages are loaded into the physical memory. So that page table need to be modified. So that page table need to be modified. Now, for the page table, so let's say I have this program requires 4 pages, right? So the page 0 is loaded into frame number 1, and the page 1 is loaded into frame number 100. Page 2 is not loaded yet. Page 3 is not loaded yet. Now, how could the computer actually operating system know? How could the CPU, when CPU try to fetch an instruction in page 2 and then find out page 2 is not loaded into physical memory? How could the CPU find this out? Then we need additional space in the page table. Actually, we just need a 1 bit. Okay, 1 bit. That's enough. Because that bit is called a present bit. Okay. The present bit is idea for the present bit is pretty simple. Now, if this page 0 is mapped physically actually in the frame number 1, that means this page is actually currently loaded into the physical memory, which is actually in frame number 1. So then I'm going to actually put number 1 in this 1 bit, present bit. Okay. Now, for page 1, which is actually also loaded, so I put 1 here. Now, page 2 is not yet in the physical memory, so I put this present bit to 0. Now, if this present bit is 0, it really doesn't matter what's the value inside here, right? It's not valid, It's because that number actually doesn't mean anything, because that page 2 and 3 is not loaded yet, are not loaded yet. So that's additional information we need to put in the page table, because not all the pages are loaded. So not all the space in the page table actually has a valid, address. Valid actual friend represent a valid friend number. Okay. So that means you need additional information for the page. Okay. Now, in that case, if the CPU try to fetch an instruction, and that instruction is in page 2, and then the CPU find out, wow, in the page table, it says page 2 is not loaded. Okay. Now, what I need to do is I need to find a physical memory space. I need to find a frame and load page 2 into the frame, right? So in that case, this is called a page fault. Okay, this is called a page fault. So a page fault is an interrupt that occurs when program attempts to reference a non-resident page. So that means the page is not yet loaded into the physical memory. Okay, and then there's an interrupt. The interrupt triggers the operating system to find the page on the disk. Okay, copy the page into frame and set the present bit to 1. Okay, when page fault happens, now the operating system is going to say, okay, I need to find a physical location in the physical memory space. I need to find a frame, and then I need to find a free frame. Okay, once I find a free frame, say frame number 50. Okay, I find a frame number 50, which is free. So then I load the page 2 into 50 and update the page table, put the 50 in the frame, and update the bit from 0 to 1. So I have to update that one information. And then I start to load, you know, the instructions in page 2, because now page 2 is in the physical memory. The page fault is very costly, as I say, because page fault requires to physically load the page into the memory frame. Okay, that's very costly because loading the page from the physical memory into the physical location, the virtual memory into the physical memory, that's very slow process. So the page fault is very costly. Okay, that's the idea of demand page. Now here's the example. Now if you read the Zai books, you will find out that example. I just take that example from the Zai book. So that's the program. This is the program in the virtual memory space. So the program takes total number of R pages. You have a page 0 all the way to page R. So that means you have a total of R plus 1 pages, right? not R, not R pages. You have 0 to R. So that's the you know that's the total number of pages in the virtual memory for that particular program. So the virtual memory is a large address space that consists of page. So the actual virtual memory is much larger, but this particular program takes that much space. Okay. Now, so based on the demand paging, not all the pages in this program are loaded into the physical memory. So in this particular example, only 4 pages are loaded into the physical memory. Okay, that is page 2, right? Because the page 2 maps to the frame number 2, and the present bit is 1. So that means this page is loaded. And also page 3 is loaded because page 3 over here maps to frame number 0. Okay, 3 maps to frame number 0 because that present bit is 1. And also page K is loaded in the because the page table shows page K is loaded into frame number 5, right? And that present bit is 1. And the page R is also loaded to frame number 4. R is mapped to 4, right? And and any other pages are not loaded. Okay. So why, if the computer is actually currently executing instruction in page number 2, that's okay, and you continue to execute the instructions here. And when you actually execute the page instructions here and to page number 3, that's fine. So in the physical memory, the operands, the CPU basically fetch the instruction that way in this order, right? Because that's number 2. When you physical active CPU fetch the instructions over here in page 2, it will actually fetch the instruction in friend number 2, right? Because page number 2 maps to friend number 2. Okay. Once the actually CPU fetch the instruction in page number 3, then 3 is mapped to page number 0. So the order is like this. So you're gonna actually go this way, and then fetch the instruction over here, continue after this one, after last one here, and then the next instruction gonna be fetched over here. Okay, continue, and then once you actually finish all the instructions in page number 3, and then start to actually to fetch the instruction in the next page. Let's say that's page 4, okay? So then I find out page 4, which is actually here, is not loaded because everything else is at 0. So it's not loaded. And then once you actually try to fetch the instruction in page number 4, then page fault happens. Okay. Now, when page fault happens, the operating system gonna actually try to find a free friend. So do I have a friend over here? And then I find a friend like number 7, for example. Okay, this is free. Okay, and then I try to load the page 4 into friend number 7, and then load the page number 4 into the friend number 7, and update this value. So now page 4 is loaded. Okay. So that means every time when I actually reach an instruction which is in a page that's not loaded, then page fault. And then once you load the page number 4, and then for the next couple of instruction, everything gonna be okay because page 4 has been loaded into friend number 7. So I continue to execute the instruction over here. That's basically the idea of demand paging. Okay. Any questions? Now, with demand paging, so you can support a large virtual memory and with a small physical memory space. Even though your physical memory is much bigger than 20 years ago, now most of the physical memories actually has like a 16 gigabytes or even 32 gigabytes. But compare with the programs you are currently running, 32 gigabytes is big, but when your physical memory actually increases, the demand also increases. Okay, so people can actually write bigger programs. People can actually try to support more programs for the physical computer system. So every time when you actually increase the physical space, and then a lot more people are going to create a software that they run on this program. So demand is always high. So then you're not gonna you're always gonna have a situation that you don't have enough memory space. Okay, That's always the case. Just like the highways. When you initially build the highway, say, okay, well, I build a highway, the population is small, and I build a highway, and the traffic problem has been solved. Not that yet, because once you build a highway, more people gonna move into that region, and it's you're gonna have actually more actual traffic in that area. So same thing with the computer technology. Okay. Now, to support this limited physical space, okay. So suppose you have a big virtual memory size is much bigger than physical memory, then you can use demand actual paging to load only small number of page into the memory. When you only load the page when it's in use. Okay, when it's in use. Now, however, this is always going to come up with a problem. Now, what about if you try to, you know, run your program and then you execute the instruction in page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. And then once you try to execute page 4, and then page 4 is not in the physical memory, so you basically find a free frame and load the page 4 into that free frame, and then continue. Now, what about if you find that page is not in the physical memory, and you try to actually look for a physical memory, a free frame in the physical memory, and you find out there's no free frame, no free frames. Okay, now that's a problem because you don't find any physical, so the physical memory is full. If the physical memory is full, then you still want to load this page, right? Because you want to execute the instruction in that page. Now what happens? Now we have to actually come up with something called a page replacement. Okay. Now page replacement is the act of overriding a page in the memory with a different page loaded from the disk when needed. Okay. Now wait a minute, because when you try to say, okay, I want to load this page because I want to actually execute this program, and this page in the program is not loaded. So I want to actually load the page into the memory, and the memory is full. So then I need to pick a victim, right? So which one I want to override? I want to actually take away this page which is in the memory and load my new page. Okay, that's called a page replacement. But what is the problem? If you allow the computer operating system to do this, you're going to be in total mess, right? You're going to be in total mess. So here's the program. This is a page I want to execute. This is a physical, this is a page table, and this is the physical memory. Now physical memory is full, so then there are some other pages actually already in the physical memory. So this page you want to load into the physical memory and it's not there. Okay, now what do you do? So you have to, you know, one thing you need to do is you need to do the swap. So you basically need to see, okay, I pick a victim, but I cannot simply replace the page just to say throw the page away and load my page. That's a problem because who knows that the page you just threw away will be used again. Okay. So that means you have to store the information about the page which is current to be replaced into the virtual memory. just make sure that the, you know, once actually, because when when you swap the page, the current page in the physical memory, when you swap this page and then load the new page, okay, now who knows that because the page you just threw away, it may belong to another program. Now the other program still believe that page is actually in the physical memory. Okay. Now, when you actually do the time sharing, when it's up the time that you know the CPU start to execute another program, the other program start to execute the instruction in the page, and then it just look at, search the physical memory for the page, and they say whether this page is loaded, and I believe the page was loaded, it's in there, but now they find out that the page has been thrown away. Now what happens?
You have to reload the page you threw away.
There are going to be a page fault again, right? That's a page fault again. So you need to load the page that was thrown away back into the memory space. Okay. Now, so that's why here we comes up with the issue. It's fine. You can actually say the memory is full, so I need to pick a victim. A particular page which is currently in the memory. I threw this. I just put the page, actually swap the page back to the virtual memory and load the page into the physical memory. Okay. But if down the road, if that page that was thrown away will be used again, you have to load the page back, right? So now here comes the scenario. If you don't actually schedule this very well, and then you will actually run into some kind of scenario, because in one page fault, you just load through one page away, load another page, and then in the next time right after this, and then you actually, the other page you have to load that page back with another page fault. So it's just like if you have, just like think about two people, you think about two people just like a two process, two actual programs. One people just say, okay, I need a space, so I just throw it away and I sitting there, and then next one, I need a seat, and they now the other guy just push you away from the seat, so they just fight each other, push back and forth. Now the cost is you're going to have a lot of page fault. You're going to load the page and through the old page, and then the old page just say, oh, I want to run this. I'm going to run. I'm still in the middle of the execution. I'm still in the middle of the program, so I need to load back. So another page fault. So you just basically run into that kind of scenario. So that's why so in modern operating system design, you need to carefully design the operating system, so make the page replacement a very smooth one. Okay. Now there are a couple of things you need to think about. During this actual page replacement, now you need to figure out. Suppose here's the physical memory. Okay. That page, which belongs to the program 1, and that page, another one is program 2. Okay. So now program 2 want to run this instruction in this page and find out this page is not in the memory. So the operating system pick this frame and say throw it away and load this page. Okay. So now when you actually threw this page away, you basically just actually, you need to be careful about this, because maybe when this page was in the memory, when this program is execute the page, that page, the data in that memory space in that page may have been modified, right? So if the page is modified, then you have to save this information about the page back into the virtual memory. So you have to save it. So make sure your modification will be saved, because later on, when this page will actually is running again, and the request for the physical memory, because it's swapped out. So when this page actually is requested to be loaded, when there's a page fault to be loaded, you have to make sure that the loaded page should be the modified page. So that means when you actually, before you load this page into the physical memory and then throw this page away, you have to save the page information into the backstore. Okay. So that's called, you know, so that's the reason why in the page table, you're going to add another bit. It's called a modified bit. Okay. So during the page replacement, you need to make sure if that page which was loaded into the memory has been modified, then before you throw it away, you have to save that modified information back into the backstore. Make sure when you when you load the page back, it's modified page. Okay. Now, another thing is, if that page has been loaded into the physical memory and that page has never been modified, it's the same, exactly the same as the page that was in the virtual memory. So that means the page in the physical memory has never been changed. So it's the same as in the back storage space. So in that case, the page replacement is going to be easy, right? The page replacement will be very easy. What do? You just simply throw the page away and replace it with the new page. Because later on down the road, when this page need to be loaded back, you just load it back the same page that was in the virtual memory. You don't have to actually, because the page never has been modified. Any questions on this? You got the idea of this modified bit? And sometimes this bit, modified bit, is also called a dirty bit. Okay. So when the page actually is loaded into memory, and during the execution of the instruction in this page, some of the value has been changed, and that means it's modified. So that means it's dirty. So you have to actually, before you throw this one away, you have to save that information, modify the information to the back store. Okay. Okay. So now we have a new kind of situation. If the operating system supports page replacement, so we actually talk about, we use the same example. We use the same example as we did for this case. Okay. So you have virtual memory, and this is the program. And then initially we have 3 pages are loaded, right? Page 2, page 3, and page K. Page 2 is loaded into friend number 2, right? Page 3 is loaded friend number 0, and the page K is loaded friend number 5. And the present page is 1, 1, 1. And the modified bit is 0, 0, 0. So that means the page 2, which is loaded in the physical memory, are basically the same as the page 2 back here. Okay, page 3 here, I'm sorry, page 2 here and here. They are the same. Page 3, I use triangle, and the page 3 here, and the page K and the page K here. So at this moment, they are identical. Okay. Now suppose as the program executes, page K becomes modified, making the copy of the disk obsolete. So that means during the execution, page K during the execution has been modified. So that means the copy in the physical memory is not the same as the copy in the virtual memory in the backstore. So the copy over here has been modified and not here. Here is still the original one. Now, what about later on if you want to replace the page 5 or page K from actually frame number 5? So if during the page replacement, I want to actually remove the page in frame number 5 and replace with another page, then you have to save that information back. Right? So if this K has been modified, so the modified bit should be changed to 1. Okay. The modified bit has been changed to 1. Has to be changed to 1. Okay. The modified bit is set to 1. So when page fault decided to replace page K in frame number 5, page K in frame number 5. Now the page fault say, okay, I have no other space available. I want to replace the page number K in frame number 5. Okay. Now, which one gonna replace page number K? Suppose page R wants to be executed, and the page R is not currently loaded, but the page R says, okay, I want to be loaded, and the operating system say no memory space, so let's do the page replacement, and I pick page 5. Oh, I'm sorry, I pick page K, which is in frame number 5. Okay, so then what I'm gonna do is with page R, you're going to replace page K in frame number 5 with page R. Then page K must first be written back to the disk before being overwritten by page R. So that information has to be saved. So I have to save that information because the modified bit says it's modified. So I have to save it. So then the page information in the backstore in the backstore is the same as over here. Okay. So when a page fault decide to replace page 2 with page 2 with page 0, okay, and page 2 is not modified, so that means the copy in frame number 0 is the same as here. Okay. Oh, the copy, yeah, in here is the same as here. It's still not changed. So when I try to replace the page 0 with page 2, then I don't have to change it. I just threw it away. So that's why it happens is that when page when page actually R replace it, okay, replace the page 5, and then the K, I just change this back to 0. Okay, if it's 0, it doesn't matter what is the value here. That means K is not loaded anymore. It was loaded, but now it's replaced. It was loaded, but now K was replaced. And the frame number used to actually store K is now store the page R. Okay, so page R is actually stored over here. Okay, so before you do this, make sure the page K the value page has to be stored in page K before you replace with page R. And also here, the page 0 actually now it's mapped to friend number 2, and page 0 is loaded, not page 2. Page 2 is actually not loaded anymore. Okay, so you need to update the page table to reflect that change. But before you update the page table, make sure before you overwrite the pages in the frame, make sure check the dirty bit, check the modified bit. If the modified bit is 1, just write the write everything of the page back to the virtual memory, and then before it's replaced. Okay, I think that's pretty much the page replacement we are talking about. Okay, um, do you have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording.